Now, let's look at what's happening in the country. Oh, there's Mandamano yesterday, there'll be Mandamano tomorrow. Oh, there's dialogues, bipartisan dialogue. It starts, a committee formed, then the committee disagrees on its own membership of the committee, of the members of the committee of that bipartisan talks, and they start arguing over that. All these things that are taking place in the country. Is the cost of unga high? Is the cost of unga coming down? Is the Ministry of Agriculture aware of who's importing maize, or is it not? Remember, they were given how many days? Is it 10 days? By the CS Medical Inturi.
10 days.
10 days.
Yes.
You, who we give a license to import, tell come and prove to us that you've imported.
Have those 10 days finished? No, they've not finished. It's like tomorrow.
They're coming to
Many things are happening tomorrow.
Governors had said in 14 days.
If you have not given us money, shutting down.
Yesterday, Njogona Ndongo went to the governor's office and said, guys, shikani kidogo. Hii mambo ni kuongea. Hii ndio nimepata kwa sasa. Hii ingine by 15th of May, I'll give you money for April. Then for March. Then for April and May and June, we'll work. You know, hii mambo ni kuongea. Okay? So let's talk about all those things. And we're now joined by Strategic Communications Advisor, Dr. Barrack Muluka. Good morning.
Morning, Erica. Good to see you again, the three musketeers.
Musketeers sasa.
Tumekusikia.
Sawa. Karibu sana. Are you keeping well?
Very well, as you can see, I'm the picture of good health.
Kabisa. Picture of good health.
The epitome of goodness.
Right. Safi.
It's how people announce themselves.
Evo, but just say it, I'm fine.
Just say I'm fine. No. Can't you see?
The epitome of goodness. And a picture of goodness and epitome of good health. This is it. Hiya, City. Please take the man to Lome.
Yes. Our proverbs for the whole of this week, ending day after tomorrow, are from the country of Togo. Now, this particular proverb was clearly created at a certain point in time when certain things hadn't become an everyday reality. Like the thing you mentioned about Vipingo Ridge. Okay? Dirty water cannot be washed. We now know it actually can.
Dirty water cannot be washed.
Yes, this is what the proverb says. And as I said, this proverb was probably set in motion at a time when this was a definitive definition.
Dr. Muluka, there's something called maana ya juu na maana ya ndani. What's the interpretation of this proverb?
You know, this is a universal African proverb. It only goes into different guises from time to time. In Emanyudia, we say that water does not have a bad heart. Maji haina roho mbaya. Maji haina roho chafu. It depends on what you do with it. You can always clean it, you can always recycle it, and you can always use it. In fact, even the water that we see flowing through sewers, it can be reclaimed. Yeah. Na ukienda kwa roho ya ndani, you know, the human being, we are told, is 2/3 water. And even the human soul is water. Yeah, and it can be cleansed. And there's nothing that we ultimately should condemn as irredeemable. Those things which we think cannot be redeemed, subjected to certain environments and treatments, can be redeemed. Never write anything off completely.
Sounds like it's the complete opposite of what that proverb is saying.
The beauty is that is the interpretation. And it is a valid interpretation. Yes.
Water cannot be?
Dirty water cannot be washed. And he's saying, thank you very much for telling us that. It actually can. So.
Yes, and hyperbole, you know, there are times when you say it the way it means something different. But when you subject it to scrutiny, you find that he was being hyperbolic, with the proverb from Omar Bongo's Lome, Togo.
giving us a completely different side. Kumbe, they want you to think.
Yes.
So you can see what is actually
imagine
now obvious.
Kusafishwa.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's a lot happening in the country politically. So the Azimio la Umoja, One Kenya coalition, after suspending their countrywide protests and demonstrations, and agreeing to talks as had been proposed by the president, then said, no, we actually want to have a different kind of engagement. Number one, these are the issues that we've been presenting, and what we're hearing from the other side is their only focus is one issue. They're saying the rest are non-issues. It's like they're dismissing us, and we insist that this is how we shall do it. Then they said, parallel to those talks, because we've already formed our team and we are ready for those, we'll be engaging with the people on what they called town halls. And then we shall also have back to the streets to remind people why we are agitating as we are agitating. Yesterday, they went back to the streets. What do you think this is all about?
Thank you very much once again. Well, what I'm seeing here is grandstanding. What I'm seeing here is an outfit that essentially wants to make the country ungovernable, so that you reach a point where you are not just going to have a conversation, but you're going to have a conversation on their terms. That this is what we want. If someone is telling you, let us talk, but they have also placed a gun on your head, and they are telling you, this is the agenda, say yes, yes. They are telling you, these are the people who are going to be involved with this talk, say yes, yes. And this is the expected outcome, say yes, yes. Because when you listen carefully, you hear them saying things like, we want the servers to be opened, which is probably a good thing, because it might put the whole debate to rest. But you are not saying we want this server to be opened through this avenue. Mind you, we are talking about a constitutional process. We are interrogating a constitutional process that has gone through the motions and reached the logical conclusion at the Supreme Court, including where the Constitution says, and the decision of the Supreme Court shall be final. But you are saying, let us reopen it, and which is not necessarily a bad thing, but you are not offering an avenue for opening. You are saying that the cost of living is bad, it must come down, and you are not bringing it down, and because you are not bringing it down, we are protesting. But you are not saying that here is the alternative agenda of how to bring the cost of living down. And because you have refused to embrace this agenda that we have given you about this formula that will bring the cost of living down, we are protesting until you bring the cost of living down. We are saying that there are 4 people who resigned from office. And the Constitution is very clear about how that kind of office is vacated. And one of the avenues is resigning. And you're saying, reinstate these people. Before you agree to these things, we are not going to have a conversation. We are going to have mandamano. It is holding the country at ransom, taking it hostage, and saying maybe because I didn't get this thing, nobody is going to have it. The country cannot go on, and it is about me.
I almost hear you speaking as though there's no validity in the claims that are being made by the Azimio side. Is that how it is seen? Of the things that they're demanding, because I've asked myself and I said, okay, look, some of the things that are being demanded, should they happen on the day, will we see that there will be peace, quote unquote peace, no matter how volatile volatile peace, if it's something like that, at least at the beginning, if those things were sorted out, let's play that for a minute and say if those things were sorted out, would we then arrive at a situation then where everything again were okay in the country?
I think, Ndu, ladies and gentlemen, to say that there's no validity is to be extremist. I certainly would like to pay less for everything that I pay for in this country today. There's valid concern about the cost of living, and it's a conversation we must have, but we cannot have a conversation with a gun on our heads. Even in school, the reason I did not excel was because the teachers used to move around the classroom with a big stick. If you want to teach me and to have a conversation with me, you put the big stick away.
Sure.
Then we can have a sober conversation. Even your children at home, if you think that you're going to intimidate them all the time with big sticks and you say that you are putting them on the straight and narrow, there will be no conversation. Talk about the cost of living, and unfortunately we have the memory of a warthog in this country, should take us back to about 15 years ago when the farmer was violated. We remember there was a time in this country when there was a plethora of maize production in the maize basket of Trans Nzoia and Uasin Gishu.
Till it was being fed to cattle.
We were saying that maize was being bought by the National Cereals and Produce Board at below production. And farmers started saying that there's no need to produce more food, more maize in this country. We must go back to that conversation, the conversation of guaranteed minimum returns for those who produce food. And I know what I'm talking about. I grow maize, but I stopped growing maize for commercial purposes. I grow just enough for my family. The rest of the land, some of it I've put under trees. The rest of it lies fallow. And if you are willing to come and buy, I'll sell it to you. That's where we must begin. What happened? It was during the President Mwai Kibaki regime when we were producing food and we didn't know what to do with it. We took this food to NCPD, NCPB, and they would take 18 months before payment. That is where the rain started beating us. That is a conversation that we must have. Then when we talk about the opening of the servers, it could be a good thing. In fact, I think it would be a good thing. But show us how. Because we are talking about constitutionalism. We are talking about the sanctity of elections. And we are talking about the decisions of constitutional entities. If we are going to reject every decision that is made by these institutions and paralyze the country because the decision did not go our way, the country can be in a state of permanent paralysis because there are decisions made every day in the courts against one individual or the other, and they have to live with it. City, it was the great Socrates about whom the courts of the day ruled that he would eat the hemlock and that he would die by hemlock. And his friends tried to get him to escape from Athens. And he said, no, laws and decisions of institutions of judgment that are legitimate must be accepted, must be obeyed, even when we do not agree with them. So a conversation can be had, and a conversation that says that in the future, beyond the decision of the Supreme Court, what do we do if we are still not satisfied that that cannot be terminal? That if there are people who have resigned of their own volition because they have been brought before a tribunal and they're feeling uncomfortable, but they elect to resign, and that resignation is within the instruments, it's within the constitution. If afterwards they have a change of heart, how do we deal with that? It is a conversation that requires sobriety, that requires genuineness of intent, not some kind of insurgency where you are saying that you're going to bring the country to a standstill, including messing up those who voted for you, because they have businesses all over the place. And when you are disrupting the country in an insurgent manner, they are also affected.
But then, Dr. Muluka, then on the other side, if, like you say, those concerns that have been raised sound legitimate and there are issues that deserve a conversation, those that are in power, should they not just be seeing this as what you've said and immediately embracing the conversation, or immediately just taking the lead and saying, so this is what we're going to do to address the cost of living, or call you and say, in Parliament, what's your proposal? If it's opening the server, this is how we'd like to, we say yes to opening the server. This is how we propose to open the server. What do you think about it? Why must they sit back and have this whole back and forth conversation of Musitulete?
And let me take a hypothetical case because I'm not William Ruto. And say now I'm William Ruto, I'm the president, elected. And after I have been elected, my foremost contender is running around the place telling people he does not recognize me. And he wants to have a conversation with me. Would I be willing to have a conversation with him? I have not arrived to the throne of power shooting my way to State House. In fact, he's the one who is telling people that they are going to storm State House to throw me out so that he can occupy it and swear himself in. And he has done that before, at least to some extent, sworn himself in. Only he did not have the mechanisms to go the whole hog. And I was there, I know what I'm talking about. I asked those questions, that after swearing in, what happens? And I advised Musalia Mudavadi and Kalonzo Musyoka, Moses Wetangula, that it was an exercise in futility. The best they could do was to throw the country into a bloodbath. Yeah, so you're saying you're going to storm State House to throw me out, and you want us to have a conversation on how I should leave the seat of power, or on what? You're saying you want to reinstate people whom, when we look at the law, we can't see where it is written that I can restore them, restore the Cherera 4 before we can have a conversation. It is what the philosophers call reductio ad absurdum. It is ridiculous to the extent of being absurd, that I should restore people who have resigned. Which avenue am I going to use to reinstate these people who have resigned? You're saying I'm sitting back, I'm not opening the servers. Show me the key, that this is the key. It's not the days of the decree when they used to say, Rais Moi ameamuru. So what's happening as a footnote is that I think Kenya's constitutionalism is undergoing birth pangs. We are not yet a democracy, but the democratic principles, tenets, and pillars of this nation are being shaken. We are going through the birth pangs of the birth of democracy, whether elections count for anything, whether the court system counts for anything. The test is on. And as happens always with every birth, either the baby will be born or the mother will die or the baby will die or both the mother and the baby will die.
Or they will live.
Or they will live.
Are you saying that the president has no role to play here? When he spoke on that Sunday, he said it's important sometimes to listen. And that's when he was extending that olive branch and saying, let's have a conversation, all right? So that means that he already accepts that he has a responsibility as the president and the head of state. He has a responsibility to see to it that this political issue is resolved. And he has a responsibility to show leadership on how this political issue can be resolved. Now I'm asking, so when those issues are legitimate like that, and he's clearly hearing what the people are saying, yes, you're saying you're addressing the cost of living using inputs, but there are people who are saying there is a current issue, need for the cost of living. What can he do? Yes, you're saying you won, your win was confirmed by the Supreme Court, you're sworn in publicly, openly, according to the Constitution, you're in office, you are exercising powers of the president today. But there's an issue about the election and the audit of the election. What role as the leader of the nation does he have?
Eric, you are rather liberal with your choice of idiom, which is very much unlike you, very much unlike the generation that I have been privileged to train in the schools of journalism and mass communications, because words have value. You don't say things like you are saying that you won the election. When Samuel Kivuitu declared Mwai Kibaki duly elected, and Mwai Kibaki was asked, did you win the election? President Mwai Kibaki said, I don't know. I was told that I won. William Ruto was told that he won.
He was declared winner.
He was declared the winner.
Yes.
And he was not declared the winner in some roadside kangaroo forum. He was declared the winner by those who were mandated to do so. He did not arrive in Monrovia shooting with AK-47.
That much we've established.
So when you talk about legitimacy,
yes,
and you take that legitimacy,
he is in office legitimately,
even to
right?
that,
and that's why I'm saying he is in office legitimately. He operates from State House. He was sworn in publicly. Everybody saw. He signed the instruments. Everybody saw that. So he is in office legitimately. But then there is this side that is saying we'd like an audit of this election.
I understand.
Now, as the person who is the head of state and government, what does he do?
I understand you to be saying that obliquely, though, that you withdraw your usage of the idiom. You are saying you are duly elected.
Yes, I withdraw that. I don't even recall saying it, but yes.
Brevity of memory.
William Ruto is in office legitimately.
It's part of the national character, brevity of memory.
And I see you picking on that so that to avoid the question. So back to the question.
I don't avoid anything. I take questions head on. Yeah. So William Ruto, as president of the Republic of Kenya, must recognize, as indeed I believe he does, that the presidency is a unifying entity in the country. Right. It should help to bring the nation together rather than to disperse it. But he also recognizes that we are a constitutional democracy. On the day that he was sworn in, he was given the Constitution as one of the instruments of state and power, and he swore to protect it. So before he even begins a digression from the constitutional path, he must ensure that the constitutional entities have been tried.
Where is the digression?
The digression is where you say, let us have the conversation outside Parliament. It's a diversion.
Why is it a digression?
It is a digression because the reason we go to elections to elect Parliament is that so that Parliament will reflect on national issues, national agendas, process them, and make them law. The divergation here is that we are being told, let this thing be processed outside Parliament, and then let it be taken to Parliament, so that Parliament only turns it into law. What is the point of having a Parliament when things are going to be processed outside? You chew it and then you spit it in the mouth of Parliament and you tell it, swallow it. Those kinds of things, City, happen in failed states. We have not yet reached there. However, if these mandamanos are going to bring total state failure, because now we are going through state fragility, then that kind of conversation is going to be tenable. But you still have got the constitutional institutions. The Constitution says that the legislative power or mandate of the country reposes with Parliament. And you are saying, let's make the law.
Surely, my brother, why then do we have task forces? Why then do we set up commissions to discuss matters which, again, Parliament could very easily discuss and arrive at a necessary conclusion, because they are, after all, our representatives. In a democracy such as this one here, there are many avenues to arriving at the same decision that you want. I don't see it a diversion, you do. But there's a conversation that I find interesting, and you brought it up. Every time we talk about the demonstrations and we talk about what's going on, everything that is said, it's like there's this one person called Raila Odinga who has the ability to call demonstrations, who has the ability to destabilize the government by his demonstrations. One person who has the ability. It's like he does these things alone, and he alone has those powers by his utterances, by the things he says. Now, he's a politician. Let's go to our President William Ruto. He's also a politician. He and his deputy say things all the time, every day, every other day. They make promises. My problem is this. When politicians speak, at what point do we just take the view that politicians are doing what politicians do and they are talking? And that you must understand that political conversation is not to be taken very seriously. It must be seen as just that, political conversation. Because if we then say that what is slowly becoming a narrative that the demonstrations are in fact a ploy to rob Kenyans of their livelihood and to get people killed and to disenfranchise people, and also to ensure that this government fails and that this one person is doing it, then what we are actually saying is that this one person has the power to do more things than even the president. Now, that, in my opinion, is not true.
Okay. Eric, words are the tools of my profession. In other environments, they will say tools of trade. And I have a wide repertoire, and I choose very carefully because I know they have value. They are not just empty vessels. So those were City's words. I would probably rearrange them to reflect my reality a little differently. It is true that throughout the pages of history, there have arisen from time to time men and women of extraordinary abilities, even abilities with the mobilization of the masses. It is true. Such people have risen, and probably Raila Odinga is one of them. Yeah, that there have been such people as Napoleon Bonaparte. There have been people like Benito Mussolini. There have been people like Otto von Bismarck. There have been people like Count Camillo.
I'm waiting for Hitler.
Camillo Cavour. You have made your own contribution by floating Adolf Hitler. That was your contribution to the conversation. Yeah, there have been such persons.
Why don't we come to the present? If you mention Raila Odinga and the powers of persuasion, let's mention our president as well. He too has the powers of persuasion.
Absolutely, I have not disagreed. Yeah, so it is a question of what you do with those extraordinary abilities that have been bequeathed to you, or you have learned, or have been thrust upon you. The great poet said that some men, he didn't say women unfortunately, but I think some men and women, some are born great, others become great, and some have got greatness thrust upon them. Yeah, whatever it is you do with that greatness is upon you. But let's agree on one thing, that the nation must speak to itself. Earlier on, City mentioned something about commissions and tribunals and so on, and they are all part of the democratic tradition. However, they are not going to happen when one party has placed an AK-47 on the head of the other one, and they are saying, I'm going to blast your brains. You need your brains to be able to think straight, to even know how to constitute your team, to even understand the issues. If someone has placed you in a context where they are saying, I'm going to blast your brains.
How is it that these declarations and the actualizations of the demonstrations, how do they amount to a loaded gun pointing at someone's head?
You must be the only visitor in town. As the good Lord would say, the only stranger in Jerusalem.
Yes.
If you have not seen that they disrupt life completely, that businesses come to a standstill, that you are using them to say that this is our bargaining chip, that we are going to ban tattoos, we are going to open up space to create an environment in which hoodlums, yahoos.
That's what they're saying.
That's what we are seeing.
Okay.
If you,
the thing is also at the same time, Barrack,
haven't seen it.
Yeah. If I can jump in, the thing is that the effect of a loaded gun would either make you do one of two things: you either surrender or you fight back, isn't it? You can try to attack the person who has the loaded gun pointed at you, or you can acquiesce to their demands and, lay flat and allow the fella to shoot you. Do we see any of those two things happening here? And I think the question there also is there an iota of responsibility that rests on the president's shoulders to say, okay, guys, hang on a minute and let's actually see beyond this? I think Mandamano is a tool, obviously, to have a conversation be had. Now, is there any responsibility that rests on his shoulders? Because it does not seem as though there's a decision is being made because there's this pointed gun at his head. I don't think the gun is even pointed at his head, if there is one.
I'll be very charitable and advise myself to refrain from commenting about thought. But let me put it this way, that number one, the president has got the responsibility to ensure that the country is at all times in a conversational mode. Mm-hmm. And to create space and environments for conversations. And it's not just the president, it's all of us. The Constitution says that everybody has a responsibility to protect this Constitution. Mm. And one of the provisions, I think, if we just start looking from around 35, today is a World International Press Freedom Day. And that reminds us of Article 35 of the Constitution of Kenya about that freedom. Creation of an environment in which we speak freely. Mm. Now, Metaphorically speaking, if you get hold of my arm and you tell me do this, and some chaps learned that even in primary school, they would get hold of your arm and twist it at the back, and they tell you, sema mimi ni Kenyatta, sema mimi ni Kenyatta, and you say, wewe si Kenyatta, wewe si, then say sema, then say, yeah, wewe ni Kenyatta, then he would leave you. Now that's what I'm talking about. And Ndu, you are right when you say you will either fight back or surrender. But Sigmund Freud, I think it was the father of psychology, psychoanalysis. He was telling us that there are three things. You will either get into the fight mood, or get into the flight mood, or you will freeze. Flight and freeze and fight, they're not helping at all. Freud did not say you will get into the engagement mode, when the gun is placed on your head. He spoke of fight, flight, and freeze. And that is quite often where nations such as ours find themselves. So drop the guns, call for a ceasefire. The conversation is not going to be a moment. It is going to be a process. Expect that there are going to be challenges, and carry on with the conversation. If this gentleman, the president, says, let it be done in Parliament, indicate why it is not happening in Parliament. But I suppose that the Odinga brigade is raising the stakes. And I say Odinga, bringing in the point, the thread that CT came up with a little earlier on. You have seen that in the spaces which predominantly we would say the terrain of Kalonzo Musyoka, nothing happens. There's no mandamano that goes on in those spaces. Martha Karua, there's nothing happening there. Eugene Wamalwa, Jeremiah Kioni, all these people are around Tinga. So we have to give it to Tinga that is the prime mover in that domain. He could also say, let us seriously give a dialogue a chance. He's not saying that. He's saying bring down the cost of living. How?
You know, Dr.
Reinstate the Cherera 4.
Allow me to ask you this question, Dr. Even as you're saying this. I earlier mentioned and stated just this little notion of power between Azimio and between and Kenya Kwanza. Who has the constitutional mandate to change things in the country? Who was elected? Because when you're elected,
President Ruto,
it's bequeathed. You are bequeathed with that duty, are you not?
President Ruto has got the constitutional power, and he's using the constitutional path to the best of my interpretation. When he says, let's go to Parliament, he's using that path. And you can see that even Mr. Odinga agreed. The people who walked away from the conversation table said, but you have brought on the table a person we do not accept. And that is normal. You can say we don't accept this one. You saw when we had the mediated Kofi Annan talks, certain names were floated. ODM floated the name of Cyril Ramaphosa. And PNU said, no, we don't accept that one because he's a close friend of Raila Odinga. Yeah? That kind of thing is part of the motions. You say, we don't accept that one. Play another card. The other side is also saying, we are not accepting Soking. They're saying, remove this one, we remove this one, you bring another one, we bring another one. the conversation carries on. But the conversation, the architecture and design of it also is problematic in the sense that they need some kind of neutral party, and therefore within the parliamentary architecture and design of such things in the past, it has always been very clear. The first committee that I ever heard of was the JM Karaoke Select Probe Select Committee in 1975, Eric. And Elijah Mwangare was the chairperson, and we followed the proceedings quite closely. There have been others since that time. Here you have belligerents who are engaged against one another. And to that extent, you may want to give it to Mr. Odinga when he says maybe the Kofi Annan style. He seems to have a point there that this should be mediated talks. Mediated talks in the sense that we are belligerents on both sides, and therefore it is difficult to bring us together when we disagree. But that point can be made soberly without Ndu Oko placing the gun on somebody's head.
You know, I suspect the good doctor here came with that gun. Because, I mean,
You might just have the gun.
This gun is somewhere.
yeah, but
Mine is in the head.
but that's where all things emanate from, the head.
What's the way out here? Because we are where we are. The bilateral talk committee has been formed.
I think
They are disagreeing, like you said, they're belligerents.
The way out still resides with the two committees. We have got more than 300 members of parliament. There are, I think, 345, almost 90.
So including senators, yes.
Yeah, 390. Surely, Azimio can get someone to replace Soking. I believe that's how the name.
Kosing.
Yeah, you know, it has got two consonants
Following each other.
the start, and a bit of tongue twisters. Yeah, and someone to replace Kenan. Then they can begin. They even haven't fleshed out the agenda. Yeah, they flesh out the agenda, and they must recognize that they're not going to get it right on day one. Yeah, then you go back to the principles. They say this is how far we have gone. It's like bride wealth. When you go to negotiate bride wealth, you don't just say, "Oh, we are going to bring five cows and 50,000 bob," and you expect the other side to agree. Yeah, or when they say we want 1,000,000 shillings and 35 heads of cattle
And a tractor.
and 3 tractors, you don't run away and say, this is too much. It is a tug of war. And in a tug of war, you tug at the rope a bit, you pass it to the fellow behind you, they pull a bit, and then you tug some more. You don't do it in one hole. That is what must be recognized, that it's going to take a little longer, and we are going to require a bit of patience. Meanwhile, we have houses to sweep, we have children to take to school, we have food to look for, we have sick people to...
Daktari, do you think that the two principals were sincere when they said they wanted dialogue?
On Palm Sunday.
I think so. I think they are sincere, both of them. But I think that they are raising the stakes.
They're raising the stakes, or as someone has suggested, they are both being held hostage by members of their teams.
That is also part of conversation. No, there are many interests in any conversation. Yeah, I look at it and say, what would the outcome of this conversation mean for me? Yeah, and therefore I dig in. And in any conversation, you will have the hawks, yeah, the hardcore, hardliners. Who say no, who will even stand up and start rushing away. Then you must also have the more conciliatory fellows who keep on saying, ladies and gentlemen, look, let us talk. Then you must have the sticklers for detail who are collecting the balls and bringing them back to the table and saying, look, ladies and gentlemen, we are losing focus. Because sometimes a conversation, a dialogue breaks down simply because Eric Latif has said, oh, you are saying you are the president. Say, what do you mean? I'm saying I'm the president. I'm the president. Maybe Eric Latif did not mean it in any bad way. So I want to believe that the two principals are serious about the need for dialogue, without which both of them must know that there will be no movement. But I also believe that they believe that they must raise the stakes, show the other side that there's something to lose, yeah, and there are certain things to be gained. Then you place what you stand to lose and what you stand to gain on the weighing scales.
Do you see those talks resulting to a reduction in the cost of unga?
Insisting on the subsidy.
They probably will, because there's a sense in which we can run and chew gum concurrently. So it's possible to look at the long-term reduction of cost of unga and the short term as well.
So it may happen as the talks go on.
Indeed.
Other things align and the cost of unga comes down and they'll claim credit.
Here it should not even be more of who
brought it down.
But that it is down.
It's down and the country wins.
Okay. Dr. Muluka, thank you very much for joining us.
Asante sana.
Always a pleasure having you here.
It's good to meet the three musketeers.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.